Have you ever stopped to think about how a name can carry such a heavy weight that it ends up burying someone's identity? Well, in Better Call Saul, we follow the journey of a man who stopped being Jimmy McGill to become Saul Goodman, an extravagant lawyer, full of tricks, but empty inside. And yet, deep down, the question always lingered. Did Jimmy really die in that process? Or was he just hiding behind the character he created? Jimmy McGill was always a guy with talent, smart, creative, capable of finding solutions where no one else could, but he was also a man full of wounds, insecurities, and an immense desire to prove he could be just as good as his brother, Chuck. That need for recognition sparked so much pain. The burden of being the troubled younger brother pushed him onto a path where the law mixed with shortcuts, and ethics became a rigged game of cards. And so Saul Goodman was born, the lawyer who turned his name into an ironic pun. It's all good, man. He became the man who laughed at the system while manipulating it, who wore flashy suits and sold confidence in cheap little packages. To the world, Saul Goodman was invincible, charismatic, and impossible to ignore. But for Jimmy, Saul was only armor, a mask that hid his pain, his guilt, and the shadow of everything he had lost. Especially Kim Wexler, the great love that turned into an open wound. What's interesting is that Saul didn't come out of nowhere. He was a process that began with small concessions. A lie here, a manipulation there, until one day Jimmy realized there was no longer a line between right and wrong. The character consumed the man, and that is when the series left us with the cruel question, how far do you have to go to be accepted? And worse, what do you need to kill inside yourself just to stay standing? But the genius of Better Call Saul lies precisely in how this cycle closes. When it seems like Saul Goodman is already an independent entity, bigger than Jimmy, the inevitable happens. The mask begins to crack. The weight of conscience, the very thing Jimmy tried to bury under jokes and forged contracts, starts to resurface. Because, in the end, the identity we pretend to be can never completely erase who we really are. Oh, and just a quick side note, if you read the kind of person who spends hours typing, writing, creating, or even binging series, you've got to check out the Apple Magic Keyboard with seriously. It's a premium keyboard that combines practicality, design, and comfort. It's like having soul as precision in the courtroom. Only applied to your daily life. Totally worth it for anyone who loves performance and style in one package. Back to Jimmy. The return of conscience didn't come in a grand way. There was no explosion, no epic speech. It was in the silence, the heavy stare, the small choices, that Jimmy began to find himself again. He realized there was no more running, that the life of Saul Goodman, no matter how bright and flashy, was nothing more than a golden prison. It was like living on a stage where the lights never turned off, but behind the curtain there was only darkness. And then came the most emotional point, the decision to be Jimmy McGill again. It was an act of courage, because it wasn't about trying to erase the past. After all, the mistakes, the tricks, and the losses would always be there. It was about facing all of it head on, accepting the consequences, and finally stopping the run from himself. That's the true return of conscience. When a man decides he no longer needs to hide behind the fantasy he created, deep down, Jimmy's journey teaches us something universal. All of us, at some point, create characters to deal with life. At work, in relationships, or even on social media, but there comes a time when the mask weighs more than the truth itself, and then The choice becomes inevitable. Keep pretending, or finally face yourself in the mirror. Jimmy chose to face himself, and in that gesture, he not only killed Saul Goodman, but also resurrected what was most human inside him. A flawed man, yes, but a real man, and so remains the great question. In the end, are we truly capable of abandoning the masks we create, or do they end up defining us forever?